January 23, 1943, Buna Airfield, Papua New Guinea. The jungle heat is suffocating. Captain Harold Watson of the Allied Technical Air Intelligence Unit stands at the edge of what used to be a Japanese airfield, now nothing more than cratered runway and twisted metal. The air smells of aviation fuel, rotting vegetation, and death. Around him, Australian and American forces are still clearing the area, 3 weeks after the brutal battle that finally drove the Japanese from this strategic position. Bodies lie in shallow graves, equipment is scattered across the compound, and among the wreckage, Watson sees what he came for: aircraft. Destroyed, burned, shot to pieces, but aircraft nonetheless. Watson isn't here to count victories. He's here to solve a mystery that's been killing Allied pilots for over a year. A mystery that began in the skies over Burma, continued over the Philippines, and reached its crescendo here in New Guinea. Allied pilots keep reporting encounters with Japanese fighters that shouldn't exist. Aircraft that can turn inside anything the Allies fly, that climb like rockets, that seem to violate basic principles of aerodynamics and physics. Most intelligence reports call them Zeros. The Mitsubishi A6M0 is Japan's most famous fighter, and Allied pilots have learned to respect it and fear it. But some of the encounter reports don't match the Zero's characteristics. These mystery fighters operate over land, far from carrier operations. They climb faster than Zeros, they turn even tighter, and they're killing experienced pilots who thought they understood Japanese capabilities. Lieutenant James Archer, an Army Air Force's intelligence officer, walks beside Watson through the devastation. Archer carries a clipboard thick with encounter reports, technical assessments, and increasingly desperate requests from operational squadrons. Tell us what we're fighting. Tell us how to kill it. Over here, Captain, Archer calls. Watson follows him to the tree line, where ground crews have dragged 3 wrecked fighters. The aircraft are mangled, landing gear collapsed, wings riddled with bullet holes, cockpits shattered, but they're intact enough to study. Watson approaches the nearest wreck and immediately knows this isn't a Zero. The fuselage is too narrow, the wing shape is wrong, elliptical, more rounded than the Zero's distinctive profile. The engine cowling is different. Even destroyed, even burned, this aircraft has characteristics that don't match any Japanese fighter in Allied intelligence files. We think they're Army fighters, not Navy. The markings are different, and we found them at a land base, not near any carrier operations, Archer says. Watson circles the wreck slowly, his trained eye cataloging every detail. The construction is lightweight, almost disturbingly so. The skin is thin aluminum, barely thicker than foil in some places. He can see where American .50 caliber rounds punched through the fuselage like paper. The frame beneath is minimal, stripped down to the absolute essentials. Get photographs of everything, Watson orders. Every panel, every structural member, every system we can identify. And I want these aircraft prepared for transport. Archer looks skeptically at the wrecks. Transport, sir? These things are barely held together. One's missing half a wing, another's burned from the cockpit back. Then we'll build one complete aircraft from the 3 wrecks. Watson runs his hand along the wing's leading edge, feeling the graceful curve. This fighter, whatever it is been killing our pilots. I want to know how. I want to know why. And I want to know how to beat it. The recovery operation takes 4 days. Engineering teams carefully dismantled the wrecked fighters, cataloging each component, photographing each structural detail. What emerges is a picture of an aircraft designed with a single-minded philosophy: performance at any cost. The mystery fighter has no armor plating protecting the pilot, no self-sealing fuel tanks, no redundant systems. Everything that doesn't directly contribute to flight performance has been eliminated. The result is an aircraft that weighs barely 4,000 pounds fully loaded, roughly two-thirds the weight of an American P-40 Warhawk. Watson finds the engine data plate on the least damaged wreck. It's a Nakajima HA-25 radial engine, 14 cylinders, approximately 1,000 horsepower. Not particularly powerful by American standards, the P-40's Allison engine produces 1,150 horsepower. But in an airframe this light, that power becomes extraordinary. Power-to-weight ratio, Watson mutters to himself. Archer, standing nearby, hears him. Sir, this aircraft weighs nothing, absolutely nothing by our standards. Put a 1,000 horsepower engine in a 4,000-pound airframe, you get performance that looks like magic. Our fighters weigh 7,000, 8,000 pounds. We need 1,200, 1,500 horsepower just to match the performance of this lightweight machine. Archer scribbles notes. So the reports were accurate. These things really can outclimb and outturn our fighters. Not just outclimb and outturn, he says. Dominate. In a turning fight, in a climbing fight, this aircraft has advantages that aren't about pilot skill. They're structural, fundamental. He pauses, looking at the thin aluminum skin, the minimal frame. But there's a cost. Look at this fuselage. Look at these wings. A few .50 caliber hits and the whole structure comes apart. These aircraft are deadly, but they're fragile, incredibly fragile. The best components from all three wrecks are carefully crated and loaded onto transport aircraft. Destination: Eagle Farm Airfield, near Brisbane, Australia, where the Allied Technical Air Intelligence Unit maintains a secure facility for studying enemy equipment. The crates also contain something precious: technical manuals recovered from a destroyed operations building, singed but readable, written in Japanese but readable. On the flight to Brisbane, Watson reviews the preliminary assessment. The aircraft is designated Ki-43 by the Japanese Army Air Force. Allied intelligence will later give it the codename Oscar, following the practice of assigning male names to Japanese fighters and female names to bombers. But right now, it's just a mystery in crates, a puzzle that might hold the key to saving Allied lives. February 8, 1943, Eagle Farm Airfield, Brisbane, Australia. Hangar 7 sits isolated at the far end of the airfield, surrounded by guards and barbed wire. Inside, under harsh electric lights, a team of engineers and mechanics begins the painstaking work of resurrection. They're not just repairing an aircraft, they're rebuilding it from fragments, using components from 3 different wrecks to create one flyable machine. Chief Engineer Robert Swanson oversees the operation. Swanson spent 15 years in aircraft manufacturing before the war, knows airframe construction inside and out, but he's never seen anything quite like the Ki-43. It's like they designed it out of tissue paper and prayer, he tells his team. Every structural member is the minimum gauge that won't fail under normal flight loads. There's no safety margin, none. The wings are rebuilt first, using the least damaged components from the 3 wrecks. The wing structure is elegant in its simplicity: a main spar, minimal ribs, fabric covering in some areas. The ailerons are enormous, providing the extreme roll rate that makes the Ki-43 so deadly in combat. But the entire wing assembly flexes visibly when lifted. Swanson orders additional bracing added for the test flights, not to Japanese specifications, but to Australian safety standards. He's not sending a test pilot up in something that might shed its wings in a hard turn. The fuselage reconstruction takes longer. The forward section from one wreck, the center section from another, the tail from the third. Welding, riveting, patching. The result looks Frankenstein-like, a patchwork of mismatched aluminum panels. But slowly, day by day, the Ki-43 takes shape. The engine is the biggest challenge. All 3 power plants from the wrecks are damaged beyond repair. Swanson's team cannibalizes parts, rebuilds the least damaged power plant from the ground up. Pistons, cylinders, crankshaft. Every component is inspected, measured, tested. The goal isn't to restore it to factory specifications. The goal is to make it run long enough for a few test flights. By late March, the reconstructed Ki-43 sits in Hangar 7, looking almost flight ready. It's been repainted in Australian markings to avoid friendly fire incidents. The cockpit has been studied, photographed, documented. Allied intelligence officers have translated the technical manuals, creating English-language pilot notes. Now they need someone to fly it. March 28, 1943. Eagle Farm Airfield, Brisbane, Australia. Flight Lieutenant William Bill Freer stands in Hangar 7, circling the reconstructed Ki-43 like a predator assessing prey. Freer is 31 years old, a veteran of the Royal Australian Air Force with over 2,000 flight hours and combat experience in the Middle East and Pacific theaters. He's flown Hurricanes, Spitfires, P-40s, and every captured Italian aircraft the Allies could get airborne. He's the obvious choice for this test flight, and he knows it might kill him. The Ki-43 sits under the hangar lights, looking alien and somehow wrong. The narrow fuselage, the greenhouse canopy, the way the wings seem too large for the body, everything about it violates Freer's instincts about what an aircraft should look like. He runs his hand along the fuselage skin and feels how thin it is. A hard landing might punch right through it. Captain Watson joins him at the aircraft. "What do you think?" "I think it looks like a death trap," Freer says honestly. "How much does it weigh?" "Empty weight is 3,500 pounds. Fully loaded with fuel and ammunition, about 5,500 pounds. Freer whistles low. "A Spitfire weighs 6,000 pounds empty. This thing is lighter loaded than a Spit is with nothing in it." "That's the secret," Watson says. "The Japanese traded protection for performance. No armor, no self-sealing tanks, minimal structure. Everything is optimized for one thing: maneuverability." Freer climbs onto the wing and peers into the cockpit. It's cramped, even for fighter standards. The instrument panel is surprisingly simple. Airspeed, altitude, engine gauges, compass, nothing sophisticated. The control stick is short and positioned between the pilot's knees. The throttle quadrant is on the left side, Japanese style rather than the British arrangement Freer is used to. The manual says the ailerons are extremely sensitive. Small stick movements produce large responses. The elevator is less sensitive and the rudder is heavy. You'll need significant foot pressure for coordinated turns. What about stall characteristics? Unknown. The manuals don't specify, and none of our intelligence reports include stall testing. You'll be the first Allied pilot to explore the flight envelope. Freer nods slowly. This is exploratory test flying at its most dangerous, taking an enemy aircraft of unknown characteristics into the air with minimal information and no backup. If something goes wrong, if the aircraft has hidden vices, he'll have seconds to react. And the reconstructed nature of this particular Ki-43 adds another layer of risk. They've essentially built a new aircraft from scrap parts. Any structural weakness, any misalignment, any component failure could be catastrophic. "When?" Freer asks. "Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours. We want smooth air and good visibility for the first flight." March 29, 1943, 0545 hours. Dawn breaks clear and calm over Brisbane. Freer arrives at the hangar already suited up in his flight gear. The Ki-43 has been rolled out onto the tarmac, its engine preheated, fuel tanks filled, but only to 1/3 capacity. For the first test flight, they're keeping the weight as low as possible. Chief Engineer Swanson walks Freer through the pre-flight inspection one final time. "We've done everything we can to make this aircraft safe," Swanson says. "But I won't lie to you, we're not sure how it'll handle. The Japanese built this for their pilots, their techniques, their training. You're taking it into an environment it wasn't designed for." "Understood." Freer climbs into the cockpit. The seat is surprisingly comfortable despite the lack of armor plating behind it. He straps in, adjusts the rudder pedals, checks the control stick movement. Full deflection in all directions. The ailerons drop dramatically with just a small stick input. The ground crew helps him start the engine. The Nakajima HA-25 coughs, sputters, then roars to life with a distinctive sound, rougher than American radials, with a rhythmic beat that suggests the engine is just barely balanced. Fryer lets it warm up, watching the oil pressure and temperature gauges climb into the green. The whole aircraft vibrates with the engine's power. At 0600 hours precisely, Fryer advances the throttle and begins his takeoff roll. The acceleration is immediate and startling. The Ki-43 leaps forward like it's been shot from a catapult. Fryer barely has time to register the speed before the tail comes up, and then the aircraft is flying, lifting off after less than 500 feet of runway. He's airborne in the time it would take a P-40 to reach rotation speed. Jesus Christ, Fryer mutters into his oxygen mask. He climbs straight ahead, keeping the throttle at cruise power, feeling out the aircraft's responses. The stick is indeed incredibly sensitive. The tiniest movement produces an immediate roll response. The aircraft feels alive under his hands, twitchy, eager. He tries a gentle turn to the left. The Ki-43 snaps into a bank so quickly that Fryer's stomach lurches. He corrects, overshoots, corrects again. It takes 3 attempts before he can maintain a steady turn. At 5,000 feet, Fryer levels off and begins systematic testing. He tries level flight at various speeds. The Ki-43 is stable once trimmed, but it requires constant attention. The aircraft wants to fly, wants to maneuver, resists straight and level flight like a restless horse. He tests stalls. At low power, nose high, the aircraft mushes gently with plenty of warning buffet. No snap, no spin tendency. Recovery is immediate with forward stick. Good characteristics for a combat aircraft. A pilot can fly to the edge of the envelope without fear of departure. Then Fryer tests what he came here to learn, turning performance. He rolls into a hard left turn, pulling back on the stick, loading the aircraft to what feels like 4 Gs. The Ki-43 turns, and keeps turning. Fryer watches the horizon rotate with a speed that seems impossible. He's turning inside the radius of any Allied fighter he's ever flown. The wings don't buffet, don't protest. The aircraft just turns, carving through the sky like it's cutting through water. He rolls out, takes a breath, tries the same maneuver to the right. Same result, an impossibly tight turn with no apparent structural stress. The Ki-43 isn't just maneuverable, it's operating in a different performance category entirely. Fryer climbs to 10,000 feet and tests the climb rate. Full throttle, optimal airspeed, straight climb. The rate of climb indicator shows 3,500 feet per minute. Better than any Allied fighter at this altitude, except for the Spitfire. And the Ki-43 feels like it could maintain this rate indefinitely. The engine isn't straining, the airframe isn't protesting. Everything is smooth, effortless. But as Fryer pushes the aircraft through its paces, he becomes increasingly aware of its fragility. During a high-speed dive, the wings flex visibly. During hard maneuvers, the fuselage seems to twist. He can feel the aircraft's structural limits, not through buffeting or control resistance, but through an almost undefinable sense that the machine is operating at its physical margins. He levels off at 15,000 feet and tries combat maneuvers, the kinds of violent acrobatics that define air-to-air combat. Split S, Chandelle, barrel roll, Immelman turn. The Ki-43 executes everything with grace and speed, but Fryer realizes something crucial. This aircraft achieves its performance by existing perpetually on the edge of structural failure. An Allied fighter, a P-40, a Corsair, a Spitfire, is built with safety margins. You can yank and bank, dive and climb, knowing the aircraft can handle more stress than you can generate. The Ki-43 has no such margins. Its performance comes from eliminating everything that doesn't contribute to flight, including safety. After 45 minutes, Fryer returns to Eagle Farm and enters the landing pattern. The approach feels strange. The aircraft floats, reluctant to descend. He has to slip aggressively to lose altitude. The touchdown is smooth, the rollout short. The K-43 stops in less runway distance than it needed for takeoff. Fryer taxis back to Hangar 7, shuts down the engine, and sits in the cockpit for a long moment before climbing out. Captain Watson and Chief Engineer Swanson are waiting. "Well?" Watson asks. Fryer removes his flight helmet and wipes sweat from his forehead. "It's a paper airplane," he says finally. "It flies like a dream and turns like nothing I've ever experienced. But it's made of paper. One good burst from a .50 caliber and it'll come apart in midair." Watson pulls out a notebook. "Walk me through it. Everything." For the next 2 hours, in a secure briefing room, Fryer provides detailed observations. The extreme maneuverability, the excellent climb rate, the light responsive controls, and most importantly, the complete absence of protection or structural robustness. "Our pilots have been fighting this aircraft wrong," Fryer concluded. "They've been trying to turn with it, trying to match its maneuverability. That's suicide. The K-43 will outturn anything we have, but it can't take damage and it can't dive, and it's relatively slow in straight and level flight." Watson writes furiously. "Tactics? Boom and zoom. Dive attacks from altitude, fire one burst, keep your speed and extend away. Never ever get into a turning fight. Use our advantages, armor, firepower, dive speed, and avoid their advantages. And if you get hits, press the attack. This aircraft doesn't have self-sealing tanks. One incendiary round in the fuel system, and it's a flying torch." The revelation changes everything. For months, Allied pilots have been dying because they didn't understand what they were fighting. They treated the K-43 like a conventional fighter, tried to beat it using conventional tactics. Now finally, they know the truth. The K-43 isn't magic. It's a brilliant engineering compromise that sacrifices safety for performance. And now that Allied pilots understand the compromise, they can exploit it. April 2nd, 1943. RAAF Headquarters, Melbourne. The tactical briefing reaches operational squadrons throughout the Pacific Theater. The K-43 Oscar, characteristics, capabilities, vulnerabilities. Fryer's observations are distributed in a classified intelligence bulletin that reaches fighter squadrons from New Guinea to Burma to the Solomons. The message is simple. Don't turn with it. Don't climb with it. Use your speed, your firepower, your armor. Hit it hard and get out. The Oscar is dangerous only if you fight it on its terms. Pilots read the bulletin with mixed reactions. Some are relieved, finally, an explanation for the mysterious fighter that's been shredding their formations. Others are skeptical. The described performance seems impossible, exaggerated. But over the following weeks, as combat reports come in, a pattern emerges. Allied pilots who follow the new tactics survive. Those who ignore the advice and try to turn fight the Oscar die. The intelligence is accurate. Fryer's assessment is vindicated. May 15, 1943. Over Wewak, New Guinea. Lieutenant Tom McGuire of the 475th Fighter Group leads a four-ship formation of P-38 Lightnings at 18,000 feet. Below, through scattered clouds, the Japanese airfield at Wewak sprawls across the coastal plain, a critical supply hub for Japanese operations in New Guinea. Intelligence reports indicated a major presence of enemy fighters, and McGuire's job is to sweep the area ahead of the incoming bomber strike. His radio crackles, "Bandits, 11 o'clock high, 6, maybe 8 contacts." McGuire spots them immediately, a formation of K-43 Oscars climbing toward the American fighters. 2 months ago, this would have triggered standard fighter tactics: turn into the enemy, establish angles, engage in a maneuvering fight. But McGuire has read Bill Fryer's intelligence bulletin. He studied the Oscar's characteristics. He knows what he's facing. "Stay in pairs," McGuire orders over the radio. "We dive, we shoot, we extend. Do not, I repeat, do not get into a turning fight." The Oscars continue climbing, trying to gain altitude advantage. But the P-38s already have altitude, and McGuire has no intention of surrendering it. He rolls inverted and pulls into a steep dive, his wingman following precisely. The Lightning accelerates rapidly, 400 miles per hour, 450 miles per hour, faster than any Oscar can match. The Japanese fighters react, trying to turn into the American divers. But the P-38s are coming too fast, too steep. McGuire centers his gun sight on the lead Oscar, closes to 300 yards, and fires a 2-second burst from his 450 caliber machine guns and single 20mm cannon. The combined firepower is devastating. The Oscar's thin fuselage disintegrates. Pieces of aluminum skin peel away. The fuel tank, unprotected, unarmored, ruptures and ignites. The fighter transforms into a fireball in the span of 2 heartbeats. McGuire pulls out of his dive at 10,000 feet, already accelerating away, while the burning Oscar tumbles toward the jungle below. His wingman scores hits on another Oscar. The Japanese pilot attempts to evade with a hard turn, the kind of violent maneuver that would defeat most attacks. But the P-38's bullets have already done their work. The Oscar's wing structure, compromised by bullet holes, fails under the G-load. The wing folds upward, and the aircraft enters an uncontrollable spin. McGuire doesn't stay to watch. He's already climbing back to altitude, repositioning for another attack. The remaining Oscars scatter, their numerical advantage meaningless against an enemy who refuses to fight on their terms. The tactic works. Over and over across the Pacific theater, Allied pilots adopt the boom and zoom approach. The Oscar's advantages, its legendary turning ability, its excellent climb rate, become irrelevant when the battle is fought vertically, at high speed, with slashing attacks that exploit the Japanese fighters' critical weakness. June 10, 1943. Eagle Farm Airfield, Brisbane, Australia. Bill Fryer flies the reconstructed Ki-43 for the 20th time, pushing it through increasingly aggressive test protocols. Today's mission: maximum performance testing. He wants to find the aircraft's absolute limits, the speeds, altitudes, and G-loads that will cause structural failure. The information could save lives. At 20,000 feet, Fryer rolls into a dive. He lets the airspeed build, 300 miles per hour, 350 miles per hour, 400 miles per hour. The aircraft begins to shake. The wings flex more severely. At 420 miles per hour, the control stick becomes nearly immovable. The aircraft is approaching its maximum dive speed, the point where aerodynamic forces overcome structural integrity. Fryer pulls back on the stick, easing out of the dive. The G-forces build, 4 Gs, 5 Gs, 6 Gs. He can feel the aircraft protesting. Something in the wing root makes a sound like canvas tearing. He immediately relaxes the pull, reduces the G-load. The aircraft recovers. But Fryer makes a note: maximum operational G-load is approximately 6 Gs. Beyond that, structural failure is probable. He lands and briefs Watson on the findings. The Japanese manuals list 6.5 Gs as the structural limit, but that's with a new airframe in perfect condition. This aircraft is barely holding together. I'd recommend operational squadrons assume 5 Gs maximum for a worn or combat-damaged Oscar. Watson adds the data to the growing intelligence file. Every test flight, every data point, every observation builds a more complete picture of the enemy fighter. The Oscar is no longer a mystery. It's a solved problem. Allied pilots know its strengths, its weaknesses, and most importantly, how to kill it without dying in the attempt. August 1943. Various Pacific locations. The air war shifts. Japanese pilots flying Oscars and Zeros still possess their legendary training and aggression, but Allied pilots now understand the game. Combat reports show a dramatic change in tactics and outcomes. Over the Solomons, Marine Corps F-4U Corsairs used their superior speed and diving ability to engage Oscar formations. The Corsairs don't turn, they dive, fire, and climb away before the Japanese pilots can respond. Oscar after Oscar falls in flames, the victims of their own design philosophy. Over Burma, P-40 Warhawks, previously considered inferior to Japanese fighters, suddenly become effective. The P-40 can't turn with an Oscar, but it's rugged, it can dive, and its 6 50 caliber machine guns can shred the lightly built Japanese fighter. American pilots in China adopt tactics specifically designed to exploit the Oscar's vulnerabilities. Over New Guinea, Australian Spitfires engaged Japanese fighters with new confidence. The Spitfire can almost match the Oscar's turn rate, but it has armor, it has structure, and it can take punishment. Engagements that once favored the Japanese now become even fights, or better. The shift is quantifiable. In early 1943, Allied fighter losses in the Pacific exceeded Japanese losses in most engagements. By late 1943, the ratio has reversed. For every Allied fighter lost, 2 or 3 Japanese fighters fall. The Oscar's performance advantages can't compensate for its fundamental fragility when faced with opponents who understand how to fight it. November 1943. Nakajima Aircraft Factory, Ota, Japan. Engineer Hideo Itokawa reviews the latest field reports from Pacific combat zones. The news is troubling. Oscar losses are increasing. Pilot casualties are mounting. The Americans have somehow learned the Ki-43's weaknesses and developed tactics to exploit them. Itokawa understands the problem intimately. He was part of the design team that created the Oscar. The decision to minimize weight, to eliminate armor and protection, was deliberate. Japanese military doctrine emphasized offensive action, aggressive tactics, and the belief that the best defense is to kill the enemy before he can shoot back. The Oscar embodied that philosophy perfectly. But American firepower is overwhelming. The heavy machine guns on American fighters punch through the Oscar's structure like it's tissue paper. American pilots no longer engage in turning fights where the Oscar's advantages matter. And most critically, American industry is producing fighters in quantities that Japan cannot match. Itokawa proposes modifications, additional armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks, reinforced structure. But the changes would add weight, perhaps 500 pounds. The Oscar's legendary maneuverability would suffer. Its climb rate would decrease. It would become more like the enemy fighters it was designed to defeat. The proposal is rejected. Japanese doctrine won't change. The Oscar will remain a lightweight, agile fighter, perfect in the hands of a skilled pilot, deadly to whoever flies it when hit by enemy fire. December 1943. Eagle Farm Airfield, Brisbane, Australia. Bill Fryer flies the Ki-43 for the final time. After 9 months of testing, the aircraft has provided everything the Allies need to know. Intelligence bulletins have been distributed. Tactical manuals have been rewritten. Fighter squadrons throughout the Pacific have adapted their techniques. This last flight is almost ceremonial, a farewell to the aircraft that changed the air war. Fryer climbs to 15,000 feet over the Australian coastline and performs a series of aerobatic maneuvers. The Oscar dances through the sky with the grace that made it so deadly, so feared, so effective in the early war years. But Fryer knows the truth that Japanese engineers knew from the beginning. The Oscar's performance comes at a terrible price. Every advantage is paid for with vulnerability. Every degree of turn rate costs structural strength. Every pound of weight saved is a pound of protection abandoned. After landing, Fryer watches as ground crews push the Oscar into Hangar 7 for the last time. The aircraft will be preserved, studied, maintained as an intelligence asset. But its operational value is complete. The mystery has been solved, the secret has been revealed. Captain Watson joins Fryer outside the hangar. "What do you think about it now, after all these flights?" Fryer considers the question carefully. "I think the Japanese are brilliant engineers who made a conscious choice. They built an aircraft that performs miracles if everything goes right. But war isn't about when things go right. War is about when things go wrong, when you take damage, when you need to get home on one wing with a dead engine. The Oscar can't do that. It's optimized for perfect conditions that never exist in combat. And our fighters? Heavier, slower to turn, less agile." Fryer smiled slightly. "But they bring pilots home. That's the fundamental difference. The Oscar is beautiful, but beauty isn't survival. The Americans built their fighters to survive, and in a long war, survival matters more than elegance." The revelation that began with wrecks at Buna Airfield has transformed Allied air strategy throughout the Pacific. The Oscar, once a mysterious, deadly adversary, is now an understood opponent. Dangerous still, but no longer mysterious, no longer invincible. Japanese pilots continue flying Oscars until the war's end, achieving individual victories, demonstrating extraordinary skill and courage. But the aircraft's fundamental compromise, performance bought with fragility, ensures that in the brutal mathematics of industrial warfare, the Oscar cannot prevail. Bill Fryer's assessment becomes the epitaph for an entire generation of Japanese fighter design, a paper airplane that could fly like a dream until someone shot at it. The lessons learned from the captured Ki-43 extend beyond tactics and engagements. They revealed the philosophical divide between American and Japanese fighter design. America built fighters that could take damage and survive. The Thunderbolt with its radial engine and armored cockpit, the Corsair with its rugged structure, the Lightning with its redundant systems. Japan built fighters that avoided damage through performance, but paid the price when that performance wasn't enough. By 1944, the air war in the Pacific is essentially decided. Japanese pilots still fight with skill and determination. Oscars still claim Allied aircraft. But the strategic balance has shifted irreversibly. Allied pilots know what they're fighting. They know how to win. And most importantly, they know the enemy's greatest strength, that legendary agility and climbing ability, is inseparable from its greatest weakness. The Oscar remains a testament to brilliant engineering constrained by doctrine and resources. In the hands of an expert pilot, with altitude and position, it remains formidable. But those perfect conditions become increasingly rare as Allied numerical superiority and tactical sophistication dominate Pacific skies. The wrecks recovered from Buna Airfield, the patient reconstruction in Hangar 7, Bill Fryer's dangerous test flights, all of it contributed to a fundamental shift in how Allied forces fought the air war. Knowledge replaced mystery, understanding replaced fear, and in the end, that understanding proved as decisive as any technological advantage. The paper airplane flew beautifully while it lasted, but wars aren't won by beauty. They're won by survival, adaptation, and the hard mathematics of attrition. Equations where structural integrity matters more than turning radius, where armor matters more than agility, where bringing pilots home matters more than dogfighting elegance. The Oscar taught the Allies that lesson, and the Japanese paid for it in the skies above the Pacific.